there's a difference between dreaming something and following through with the dream. Dreams get people excited, but when you have the courage or the faith to actually begin to take steps towards it, that's when people come with you.
Well, welcome back to the Church Circle podcast, season 2. We're flying through these episodes, and this one's a little bit different today because normally I'm on a different time zone with people in a different country, chatting with people, but I'm very privileged and honoured to have my own pastor from my own church here in Norfolk in the UK. So we're not in a different time zone. We're about 20 minutes away from each other right now. We could have done this in person, really, but we're doing this online to save some time. But it's Jon Norman, Pastor Jon Norman from Soul Church, who I joined Soul Church about 2 or 3 years ago. Saw what was happening up in Norfolk, and we decided to make the move. Felt like God was leading us there, and it's been an absolute honor and the best 3 years of our lives. And firstly, Jon, thank you for pastoring us so well and leading Soul Church so well with your wife Chantel. And I'm just glad we could get you on the podcast because a lot of people often see you on social media or maybe seen some of your preaching before, or maybe don't even know who you are, but I get to see kind of a different side as a pastor. And I know you lead with integrity, you lead with vision, you carry the church in a climate and a condition in the UK that's unprecedented, and you're doing that so excellently and so well. And I think you're making a huge impact in the city of Norwich. So firstly, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here. And just so people who don't know you, maybe just share a little bit about who you are and your story.
Well, Reuben, thank you. And to all the listeners, it's an honor to be on here. And I always say together we're stronger, so we can learn some things from each other. And I know this podcast is a blessing to many people, so it really is an honor to be amongst it today. So a little bit about me. I'm a local lad. I grew up in Norwich, then went to Australia to Bible school, which turned into bridal school, where I met my wife Chantel, who was also at Bible school from California. So we went to Hillsong Bible School for 3 years, and then we came back to England, got married in 2006, and then we moved down to Cape Town, South Africa for the next 6 or 7 years as part of the Hillsong Church plant there. And then we moved back up to Norfolk, to sunny Norfolk. Really felt God stirring us to pioneer our own church, which is where we started in 2013 or start of 2014, Soul Church. We just completed 10 years.
Yeah.
So that's my life in a nutshell.
Very much a nutshell.
Yes. Tell I've done that before.
Yeah, you can. Well, you could go on for minutes and hours potentially about what led you to this point and how you got here. And I know there's a lot of stuff in there, and God's definitely at work. You know how He's ordained you and moved you around the world, but then brought you back to your place of birth. And for those of you who are listening, this is the first UK guest and UK host that we've done on this podcast. So Norfolk and Norwich. Norfolk is out of the way. It's like on the east coast of England. It's you don't ever travel through Norfolk because there's no like through road. You go to Norfolk as a destination. So in areas it's a little run down. In other areas it's very quiet and country. And it's one of the greatest places I think in the UK, but it's also a hidden gem. But the city of Norwich is not how should we say? It's not a particular destination for pastors aspiring to make a big difference in the world. It's one of those ones that's often looked down upon as a city. It's made fun of in the UK. And so for Jon to be here after being in Cape Town and in Australia, it really shows that God is at work, because I don't think anyone would necessarily return. And we talked about this the other day when we met. It's definitely a place that you have to feel like God's calling you to be here.
Absolutely. I mean, my wife and I always joke, Norwich was on the list. It was just right at the bottom. And so we really did feel a strong conviction. We had opportunities to go to San Francisco, Atlanta, Liverpool in the UK, but we really felt God call us to come back. And, there's that famous verse, can anything good come out of Nazareth? Well, I felt God challenge me. Do you think anything good could come out of Norwich? And so we really did. We took that to heart and pioneered in 2014 and started in Starbucks. 25 of us on a Wednesday evening, and that's where it all began.
And this is Soul Church that we're talking about. And Soul Church has been on a journey for the last 10 years. 60 years of heritage and 10 years as Soul Church, right?
Yeah, 60 years of heritage. I grew up in the church that we took over, and I'd never like to say we shut it down. I think we transitioned into a new season.
Sure.
But I'm a big believer in honoring the past, living for today, and building for tomorrow. That's kind of one of the mantras I live by is honor the past. We're standing on the shoulder of giants. There's been some spiritual giants that have gone before us and paved the way with resources, wisdom, all the various things that have made Soul Church what it is today. So we're very much aware of that. We're just one of the generations who are being blessed by previous generations.
Yeah, and you can see that outworking in kind of what we're going to go into in a second. This whole conversation is around vision and giving, but there's a lot of pretext to this because you've just launched a new building. We've just moved into a new building it was about 5 months ago now. And it's one of the most ambitious church projects probably in the UK. One of the bigger building projects in the county. And it's been a journey for the last 7 years that it's been in the pipeline, but it goes back further than that. Maybe just kind of share the story about, how we got to move into a new building 5 months ago.
Yeah. So in 2006, I was the youth pastor in a church called in Mount Zion Family Life Center. And in February 2006, there was an arson attack on the church, and the church was completely destroyed. It was £1 million building back then, completely destroyed. It was underinsured, sadly. And they were never able to rebuild it. But there was a 5-6 acre site, prime real estate on the edge of Norwich on the ring road. And when we decided in 2013 to move back to the UK from Cape Town, we were gifted that piece of land. It was holy land. It was sacred. It had been set apart for the kingdom, but there was just no one with the ability or hadn't had the ability yet to raise the finances to rebuild it as it was underinsured. So we didn't feel it at first. We were offered considerable money for it to be built up, various retailers, and we were close to potentially at one point even selling it. But that would have been the easy option. But we really felt that was holy land. And so in 2017, I was in Orlando, Florida, and felt God speak to me we were on a sabbatical on the way back to start making plans to build. So 2017, we got some like-minded people together, some visionaries, assigned an architect, and really it was a case of you can't finish what you don't start. You have to get started. I was speaking at Wildfires in the UK on Monday, encouraging local church pastors, and I really took on that thought that a lot of us, we're waiting for everything to align, the stars to align, all the money to come in, everything to be perfect, and then we'll get going. And God said, just start. And so we just started, and we needed £200,000 for architects' fees and council planning fees and all those fun things. And so I set off on 7 marathons in 7 days, and we raised nearly $250,000 in a week to get the project going. That's kind of that. It was a 7-year project from the day we started to the day we finished. And
there's been a lot of setbacks, and I think it was originally a 3-year project, and it's 5 and 7, and there's been a lot of things along this journey, and it's definitely, you can see the hand of God at work in this. There's no way that we could have done this, or you could have done this as the church, without the hand of God in it. And I just want to give some context as well. It's very unusual in the UK to do a building project like this. In the US, it's far more common to build things from scratch, right? You have much more land, resources are a little bit easier to attain, and therefore churches can be built pretty easily. In the UK, you're not just coming across resources and church size and numbers, you're also coming across a lot of red tape. There is tons of red tape in the UK, and it quite often gets in the way of churches wanting to stretch out and do things. A lot of it's got to do with, do you meet certain needs of the community? Are there certain, we went through a lot of environmental stuff and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of red tape. It often limits church vision in the UK, I think. And part of this conversation today is to kind of see, okay, well, this is a big vision in a small city, and how do you outwork that vision? How do you get people on board with the mission as well? So I'm really excited to get into this. In regards to that, with it being a difficult kind of place to lay down vision and to get people on board. How did you do that, especially in 2017? It was the church isn't what it is now. Back then, you'd only been in the role for 3 years as a lead pastor of Soul Church. So how do you get people on board with that kind of journey and bring people with you?
I think there's two things people are attracted to. They're attracted to vision and they're attracted to faith. They're the two things you've got to have. There's an old saying that the dream is free, but the journey isn't. It's so true. Anybody can dream. We could dream of putting a spaceship on the moon tonight, but it doesn't mean to say it's going to happen. So there's a difference between dreaming something and following through with the dream. And I think what I realized was dreams get people excited, but when you have the courage or the faith to actually begin to take steps towards it, that's when people come with you. And I think one of the dangers is we put a dream out there and then we sit back and wait for it to happen. And it never does happen like that. You have to go after it. That's why for me, I put the dream out there. And the first thing I did is bought a pair of running trainers and thought, right, so people could see that I was serious about this. I was prepared to put my body on the line. And so I think for us, it was about, I think you've got to set a big vision. God's a big God. There's nothing that can limit God, but then God moves when you move. God is drawn to movement. We forget that. God was drawn to Noah. He built the ark, and then he waited, and then it rained. It happened in the completely the wrong order for Noah. Noah was like, "Oh God, you send the rain, and I'll get going." God's like, "No, you do what I instruct you to do. You be obedient, and then I'll save your family."
Yeah,
and I think for many leaders, we get things completely upside down. And so it's setting the vision, staying clear on the vision, keep it clear, keep it simple. And then what is the next step? And the next step is proactive. So it's like, for me, it was like, okay, I need to raise some money. I need to sit with some council meetings. I'm a big believer. Every single problem we face has a solution. We just have to find it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting what you said too about America, because I love being around Americans, because one of the things they do is they are solution focused. Mm-hmm. So when I'm in the States, there are problems, but they seem to always have this mindset of, we've got this mountain, but we think we can find a way over it. And so I would spend a lot of time in America and talking to pastors, leaders, and they would help me. So one of the answers to the question is, you've got to get around people who've done what you want to do, and you've got to let their faith rub off on you. So, it's controversial, but, the Brits can be really negative. Now, I'm a Brit, so if you listen to this and you're British, I'm sorry, but I'm one of you, okay? We are so negative. We're so cynical. We love to tell you how you can't do it. Well, when I go to America, all they do is tell me, I say I need to raise 10 million. They're like, yeah, we can do that. It's like, what do you mean we can do it? Yeah, there's ways we can do that.
Yeah.
You think, and like, we raised $100 million for our building, and you just need to raise 10. Let's bang our heads together. And so you've got to get around like-minded people.
Yeah.
You've got to get around people who can believe in not people who are going to pull you down, people who are going to lift you up. And so I probably lost some friends in that 7 years because I had to.
Yeah.
It wasn't like I don't love you anymore. It's just like I can't be around people who can't see what I can see.
Sure. It's interesting that you said it's about the marathons you did, because I think quite often with pastors, and this is not to come down on them, but what can quite often happen is that the vision's laid out and then they expect people to come on board straight away. But one of the things I noticed about what you did was you said, well, it starts with me. If everyone's going to take personal responsibility to move this thing forward, it has to start with me. And I have to do something that shows sacrifice, because in order for us to achieve this building, it really was about sacrificial giving beyond just generosity. And so the first thing you thought of was to do 7 marathons in 7 days, which is insane. That's something that you see people celebrate. I know some guy just did 30 marathons in 30 days in the desert, and that's got huge press coverage and stuff. The 7 marathons in 7 days is no small task. I know there's a documentary about it as well. If you search 7 in 7 on YouTube, Soul Church, you'll find the documentary there as well. But you really have to bring people on board with you. And did you find that moment was when it felt like the thing had wheels, like it was moving, or was there still some resistance into getting people on board?
Well, it's funny you should say that, because day 3 of 7 and 7, I think we'd raised like £7,000. And I remember getting into, every day we had a minibus support team. I got into the support van and I said, God, I'm not doing this for £10,000. I would have given £10,000 personally not to have done it. My body was torn up. I spent a whole year of my life training away from family. My kids were young. My God, you need to pull your finger out here and get people to give.
Yeah.
And, within seconds of me saying that prayer, someone dropped 10,000 in that moment. And then it was like the windows of heaven opened over the next 4 days. And we raised, I think it was 247,000. And it was like, wow. But I realized that we, as you said, we personally had to take responsibility for this. We had to let people see that we were serious.
Yeah.
And I think if we sit back, I think it doesn't matter if it's a church or any business, you cannot sit back. You've got to be on the front foot. You've got to do everything you can do and then allow God to do the rest.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that old mantra of do your best and let God do the rest.
Yeah.
And it is that, there is that element of, I think quite often we pray for things and expect it to just happen.
Yes.
But there is the element of God's like, okay, well, show me how serious you are. Because,
Sure.
It's the story of the talents, right? The parable of the talents as well. It's that God entrusts what you're capable of looking after. And so if we have to show him like, okay, what can we look after? What can we be trusted with?
That's right.
Moving kind of slightly to a different point of conversation, in these big projects that take years and years, it's very often very difficult to keep this momentum going. Like the 7 marathons in 7 days, well, that's a pretty small time frame, and a lot of people can get on board, can follow the journey, especially when you have setbacks and stuff. We're looking at a 7-year project. How do you the question I have is when you have to pivot, there's certain things. So obviously it wasn't meant to be a 7-year project, it's meant to be shorter than that. How do you pivot and still keep people with you? How do you explain to them these situations? And, especially when people have already given, they've already sacrificed, and they don't see that that outcome as soon as they would have liked. How do you keep that momentum going?
That's a really great question. That's a question that I really wrestled with for many months and years. I think one of the things is honesty. You have to be honest. Chantal's my wife, and we made a commitment at the start of this project that we were going to be fully upfront and honest with the church. So when we had good news, we would celebrate. Like, we had a £1 million gift 2 or 3 times. We had, crazy stuff, stories. And we would like, guys, you would never believe what happened here today. God has just come through miraculously. The builders can come back on site. We're ready to go. And then it was, guys, this is really bad. Like the council have told us we can't build until this situation's. So we need you to pray. And I think one of the mistakes that we can get ourselves, and I've made this mistake, but I felt we did this one quite well, is just being honest and open with the church and actually going, if you build your own house, you're going to have setbacks. If you do an extension, if you put a conservatory on, there's going to be good days and there's going to be like, if you've ever worked with builders, I mean, these guys, they speak a different language. They are on a different time zone. They live on a different planet. I mean, they speak in riddles. Mm-hmm. It's like, we've just been working with them. I mean, try get them to write an email. So, if you're a builder, I'm sorry, but, so we had all these challenges, but we were honest. We just tried to be as honest as we can with the church. I think there's a grace with honesty. I think there's a grace. I think if you only share the good stuff, I think people then they get a little bit. There's just a little bit of uncertainty. So first of all, is be honest. Just be honest when you have to pivot. The second thing is you've got to adjust. So when we first drew up the plan 7 years ago, the world's changed in 7 years. We've had a world pandemic. We've had a war on our continent. We've had all sorts of things happening with, various things happening in culture and climate. So everything's changed. We had an environmental condition put on the building in that time where we had to spend a couple of £100,000 on solar panels and all sorts with the climate change issues. We had an issue called nutrient neutrality where there was sewerage issues around the nation, and we had to stop. And we had to rethink how we're going to do some things. We had issues with the number of toilets on the building. We had issues with, obviously, one of the things I'd always wanted was a great Christian resource center within the church where people could come in and buy books and Bibles. But in 7 years, the rise of Amazon meant that just wasn't necessary.
Yeah.
So we built a resource center. But the reality is however cheap I could sell a Bible, Amazon could sell it cheaper and deliver it to your doors. So that was a non-starter.
Yeah.
Then we had the rise of the poverty off the back of COVID. And so we're like, let's turn the resource center into a social supermarket to help feed the poor in our city. And so it's like we just had to keep pivoting. And we're still pivoting. There's things when you build a building, you go, oh, that didn't quite work out the way I thought it would. Mm-hmm. So let's use that for that. We've just changed all our dream team area. We thought we were going to put it on one side of the building. We completely changed it because we had to pivot. We've had lots of families who bring in children in with special needs, and we needed a SEN room. And we wanted to create SEN services for our kids with special disabilities. And so we changed our dream team, our volunteer lounge, and turned it into a place where children with special needs could access a service. So again, it's constantly going, what's the need of the church? How can we pivot? And I would really encourage pastors and leaders, do not get locked in on anything. Just do not, whether it's service times, run sheets, ministries. Some things are seasonal, some things aren't. We've just scrapped our 5 p.m. service. Off the back of COVID, I realized that people's time is more precious. Sunday night, if you think about the two most precious times of the week, they're Friday night and Sunday night. That's the times I put them the highest price times, highest budget times. And people fight for those times. And church, we're like, why are we trying to take people's highest price times of the week? So we just do once a month Sunday night, and then use that time so people can spend with family and friends and build community. And it's been a huge win for the church. Mm-hmm. But I've always had the mindset you've got to do Sunday night church. Who said?
Yeah.
Who said that?
Yeah. It's really interesting. I think one of the things I've noticed about your style of leadership as well is that honesty aspect. I know there's a lot of decisions that get made behind the scenes, especially when you're a pastor, but being able to communicate that to your church actually is not going to cause more confusion quite often. What it does is brings clarity, and it says to congregants, like, I value your input, I value you being here, and I'm trying to communicate this to you so you know what's going on in the life of the church. And I noticed this. I joined this building project just as we broke ground, so I kind of saw these delays at certain points, and especially this environmental stuff. And it was always an honest conversation. Even on a Sunday, you would say, okay, well, this is something that we're going to pray into. This is something that has happened. But I want to bring you on the journey. I think when you've got stakeholders in the church like that, and I say stakeholders not as key investors, not as these big kingdom builders and stuff like that. I'm talking about like people in the church who are sacrificially giving, because they are as important as those big stakeholders we often refer to. They want to know, and it's not they want to know because they want to know how their money's being spent or anything like that. They just want to know because they care about the church. If they're building their own house, it's the same thing. They'd want to know about why you're choosing a certain material, or they want to know about why this has been delayed. And it's not because they want to have an influence in it necessarily. It's because they just care about it. And I think quite often in the life of church, there's a lot of smoke and mirrors. There's a lot of stuff that happens behind the scenes, and obviously rightfully so. Sometimes there are things that need to be addressed privately, especially when there's pastoral matters. There's a lot of things that actually, if you brought the church on the journey with you, you'd find a lot more buy-in, because they actually get to know, like, if you said, okay, hey, we're struggling in this area, whether it's volunteers, it's letting on a little bit. It's being humble enough to say, this is a problem, and we're going to find a solution as a church, not everything's great and we're just going to deal with this behind the scenes. So I really appreciate that. It's a breath of fresh air. And I think it is important when you do deal with these big issues, when you do these big project timelines, you do have to be honest about it and say, look, this isn't working, or we're going to switch, or we're going to pivot. And even the 5 p.m., you've made no qualms about making it clear, okay, this wasn't something that was working, or we want to give time back. And then you've also introduced a Thursday night. So it's not like the church is stepping back in any way. You're just adjusting things. And I think that's really key, and just being clear with that. And I think that's a great point of just be honest about stuff.
I think there's two types of decisions. There's the easy decisions, then there's the tough ones. I call the tough ones 51-49ers. It's when 51% is right. So it's only just the right decision. And the problem with 51-49 is people are slow adopters to it. But it's only over time they realize that was a good decision. So at the time when I scrapped Sunday nights, at first people were like, what's he doing? And then now they're going, actually, that was a really good decision. But at the time, it's just, we could have kept going and it would have been a 49% decision and it would have been still good, but it was the right decision. And so never be afraid of a 51-49. They're the difficult ones. They're the ones where you don't get immediate buy-in. You only get, but deep down in your heart, that's the right decision for the church.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest things I do is when I make a big decision for the church, I ask myself this question: am I doing this in the best interest of the church, or is it for the individual? And anytime I've made a decision in the best interest of an individual, not the whole church, it's gone wrong.
Mm. Yeah, that's interesting.
And that's difficult sometimes because Jesus went after that one sheep. We love the one, but sometimes we make our decisions trying to keep that person happy or that person happy. But our job is to lead the flock to safety and protection and green pastures. And sometimes that we have to make tough choices because God shows leaders things that he can't show others things.
Sure.
And it's only over a period of time they see it as well.
Discover a community that truly understands your passion for ministry and the challenges that come with it. Welcome to Church Circle. More than just another Facebook group, Church Circle is a vibrant network of church leaders, staff members, and creatives who are committed to learning, growing, and supporting one another. With weekly live meetups featuring engaging conversations on the most important topics facing the church today, you'll never feel alone in your ministry journey again. Say goodbye to juggling multiple inactive groups and hello to the one-stop shop for all your ministry needs. Join the movement and experience the power of community at churchcircle.com today. How has this experience, like the last 7 years, how has it shaped how you cast? I mean, we're about to head into our vision season this autumn. How does that shape how you cast vision? Especially as now we're kind of completed the building project. I know there's still more to do, but in terms of how we see it, perceive it, it's completed, and we want to move and do more things. How do you now start to step into that? Does it change your approach?
I think it does. I think, we actually just changed the name. Our miracle offering was Heart for the House for the last 10 years. We're just changing it to Heart for the Kingdom. And I think we've done that deliberately this year so people can see a progressive change of direction. The vision of the Soul Church has never been the building. That's been the vehicle that's housed the vision. I think one of the challenges where we're not raising money for the building, we've been raising money for the vision. What is the vision? People.
Yeah.
It's love and action at Soul Church. It's the people. The people will always be the primary vision for our church. But I think you just have to flex. And so for us this year, I think we're not going as hard. People have given sacrificially, as you said, Rubes, over the last 7 years. People have given to where it hurts. People have sacrificed, belongings, holidays, things, upgrades on cars. People have given to it hurts. And so this is still an opportunity to give. This is still, but I think we're taking the rah out of it. I think we're just going, guys, let's just let this breathe. We've got ideas, ministries. And I've got this dream of having a hope line, a phone line where people can call up 24 hours a day for prayer and support. And that's a dream in our heart. We've got a dream for a Christian school. And we talk about this in the vision video for Heart for the Kingdom. But it's just going, okay, guys, we want you as a church to know how grateful we are. So this year it's almost an expression of gratitude. Going, church, thank you. Thank you for your sacrifice, your obedience. And yeah, there's these big things in our hearts, and we're going to get there, but we just wanted to say thank you. So I think there's seasons where you just need to just sailor a little, and just not always push the accelerator down as hard. Like our church has gone so hard over the last 6 months. Our staff, our dream team, and we can't. You can't run at the same pace. This is more of a, hey, we just need to slow down a little bit. Understand where people are at.
It's understanding the rhythms and the pace. From what we're talking about, we talk about the moving the 5 p.m. or introducing something on a Thursday night, or slowing down and speeding up. It's very much about understanding the pace of where people are at. And it's not necessarily making decisions based on the individual, like you said, but understanding, if you think about it like a flock of birds or like a herd of sheep, for example, you're moving them through different seasons and avenues, and you're moving from one field to another, and you have to squeeze through the gate. And there's different ways you manage and maintain those things based on where you're traveling to. And I think it's very much a good indicator of a church is to have a finger on the pulse of what's happening in the life of the church, as opposed to just, I hate to use the word a dictator kind of style, but from the platform where it's just, this is what we're doing, this is where we're going, and you guys can either say yes or no, and we're going there. It's very much okay, let me understand what the life of the church is, let me get in amongst it. And then from there, you develop a very good understanding and have some wisdom around, okay, well, how do we move as a church? Because I understand the people that are in it. It just, the word finger on the pulse, that phrase, that's what it kind of feels like. And I think that's the kind of season it sounds like you're moving into right now. It's just, let me understand how the last 7 years has affected the church. Let me get a good understanding of that. And then as we've got these great ideas of vision in the future, let me introduce that in a way that is going to be healthy and sustainable for the church in the future. You're right. There is a pace that you've got to keep up and down. And it's a good point. And I think there's lots of churches that are probably heading into the speeding up season, especially as we start to introduce these ideas of buildings and big giving campaigns. So what advice would you give to a church leader that's maybe stepping into a season where they really have to pull the ranks together and to say, hey, this is something that we really need to step into as a church, and we need to give and sacrificially and get on board with the vision? Like, what would you say to that person?
I mean, I would say what I say to myself every day: don't quit. If God has given you that dream and you have a peace in your heart, you have to go after it. You have to go after it. For 7 years I was running, and I just did not, that scripture, I will not go until you bless me. It's like, I will not let go until this blessing has been materialized. And I think a lot of leaders, they get a dream, they run after it, they get a couple of wins, and then they get a load of setbacks, and they think, this wasn't of God. Well, maybe it was of God. It was just that you didn't keep going. And so there was many times I felt like quitting. I'll be honest. I've said this to church. I felt like quitting. We had a debt-free building. It wasn't great, but it was a warehouse. It kind of did the job. We, Reuben, you and Megs were part of that for years, and we could have just stayed in the safety of that boat, and it would have been easy. It would. There's no debt. We could have just carried on, but we felt we had to keep going. And so I would encourage pastors, leaders who are listening to this, if God has given you a dream, do not let go of it. You have to. And there's going to be weeks, months, maybe even years where everything is against you. Every single thing from hell comes against you. Yet you know that God gave you that dream. Well, if God gave it to you, he cannot lie.
Yeah.
He cannot lie. He is true to his promise. He's true to his word. So you have just to keep going. And then I remember one day, I think I got 7 waves of bad news. I mean, anything bad on that day could happen. And I remember it was 10 o'clock at night. I said, I'm actually going to switch my phone off because I can't handle it anymore, because it just kept coming.
Yeah.
And I woke up the next morning, and I remember God gave me Lamentations 3:22. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercy never comes to an end. It's new every morning. And God just gave me enough mercy to keep going. And every single one of those mountains we conquered.
It's great. And it is true. I noticed you've got the sign up there saying, don't you dare give up. And it's,
that is literally, that is my life motto. Don't you dare give up, because what are you going to do? What's the alternative?
Yeah. And I think that is when there's that fear and that you don't step out in that, I think the complacency shows itself, and it's not even an active. Sometimes it's not even an active thought to be complacent. It's just you're locked in on what you think is the best decision. You know, when we look at risk, especially of this new building, there was a lot of risk involved to the church's future, the church's health. But if you know that, faith shows up most during risky moments, right? You can't, if you've got this debt-free building and you've got these great things you're doing, but you know the church needs to move into a new step, you're holding and limiting the church on what it can do based on your complacency or fear. And so to be able to then take that and go, actually, there is some risk, communicate that to the church, be honest about that. These are the things we're coming up against. These are the things we want to do. But we know that God's got us. And we know that if we all pitch in, we have faith and we sacrificially give our time, our resources, our finances, our energy, whatever it is, that we can get through this. And, that doesn't just apply to church buildings. That applies to ministries. That applies to personal life. That applies to buying houses, careers. There's all these things where you say, look, I know that God wants me to do this. And it's always about getting that download first. And then saying, okay, well, what's the next steps? And I can say it in my own life as well. I've seen God move in every single situation where I've gone, I feel like God is leading me to this. And I'm not going to give up, but also I've got to find a way to make this work. And he's never let me down. So that's a great thought, Jon.
The secret as well is to keep confessing the goodness of God, even when you're not experiencing the goodness of God.
Yeah.
And that was a weapon that got me through, is keep confessing God is good, God is faithful, God will get me through, even when I'm not feeling it. So faith is activated by our words. Yeah. Faith comes by hearing. You've got to hear it. So you have to, every day I was like, this building is going to be paid for. We're going to get the mortgage secure. We're going to get the planning. It's going to happen. And by the way, every email in front of me said the opposite.
Yep.
So you have to override the natural with supernatural.
That's good. This isn't a question that's on the list that I sent you, but it's a question that's kind of come up now. Is how do you think this impacts people in the church now that they've seen this outwork in the church? I think there was a moment, even I'm sure my mum won't mind me saying this, but my mum, who lives a couple of hours away, my parents traveled up and they came to the opening weekend of the building. My mum was emotional. She was crying about the fact that she came into this building and she'd seen the outwork of the goodness of God in this project. How do you think that has impacted the life of the church? Like in terms of the individual in their own life, how does that impact what they've seen?
I think it builds trust in God, because, we had many doubters. We've had people leave our church because of the building, because they never thought it was going to happen. They just thought it was a pipe dream.
Yeah.
So people now cannot deny how good God is. This building would have been impossible in our own strength. Impossible. I could tell you story after story. So I think people's faith is enlarged. And then let's come back to what we said right at the start. If God could do this in Norwich, God can do it anywhere.
Yeah.
God takes the foolish places, the foolish things of this world to confine the wise. And I think people in metropolises like London and Birmingham and Liverpool and bigger cities are looking at going, man, God can do that in Norwich. What could he do in London?
Yeah.
So I think that there's an old saying, when the water rises, all the boats come up with it. I think the water's rising, the spiritual tides are rising, and I think people are looking, whether it's your family down south or, I'm speaking to a partner going, man, God could do this. God could do this in Amsterdam. God could do this in Stockholm. God could do this in Belfast. And so for us, I feel like God's almost given us this flagship faith building to really, really inspire the kingdom of God at large around the world.
Yeah, I'm going to get the saying wrong, but essentially it's about, have a dream so big that it will completely fail unless God shows up. And I think that is the thing, is sometimes our faith and how we step out still has a safety net below, right? It's the safety net of, I've got that money in the savings account. I can probably swing it if something goes wrong, but this was one of those moments where you had no safety net and you just had to step out and go, well, this is, to be real, at times financially it could have ruined you, and it could have ruined the church as well. And that's not to say it's to be, a bad steward, but not by any means, but it's to say, look, God, I'm trusting you with this. I know that you're going to come through whether we advance or whether we have to retreat. I know that you will always have a plan that works. And I think that's incredible. And I think it's really encouraging for other church leaders to hear, and even church staff and volunteers as well, who are just thinking about, okay, how can I support my leader in this vision as well? Is that we all play a part in this. We all are sacrificially giving. But also we can all start, it can all start with us. What's the first step that you can take personally to make this happen? So these are great thoughts, Jon.
You just touched on something there, that the difference between being faith-filled and reckless, because I felt that tension a lot.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you can have reckless faith, but the difference between reckless faith and faith-filled faith is peace. When you have a faith-filled faith, it's like you have this peace that you go, God, I know you're in this. I think when you're reckless, you're doing it in your own strength. And so there's one thing I didn't lose. I never lost one night's sleep on that project in 7 years, not one night. I tell a lie. The night before we opened, I did.
But that was excitement, probably.
That was just adrenaline going, oh my goodness. Reuben's mum's in town. I need to make sure I'm on best behavior. So yeah, for me, so that was almost my ometer. I'm not losing my peace.
That's great. Yeah, I think that helps to balance the tension, doesn't it? If you can say, okay, this is something that I'm scared about. There's fear, there's risk, but is God in this, and am I at peace? And that's like you said, the ometer. That's a good way of describing it. Well, Jon, thank you so much for joining us. We could keep talking about this. Maybe we'll do another one in the future about something specific again. But I really enjoyed this conversation. I'm hoping you, the listeners, have enjoyed it as well. If you have, please leave a rating on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify. Give us a star, and maybe leave a comment about the show as well. We'd really appreciate that. And Jon, how can people connect with you? How can they find out more about what you're up to? And just if they want to get connected and find out more about the journey of Soul Church, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, you can head to our YouTube channel, Soul Church UK on YouTube. So you can go there. I am on social media, Jon Norman. So you can look me up there as well, on Instagram. I'm not on TikTok yet, so one day.
You don't need to be, don't worry.
But yeah, if you want to stay in touch, strike me a DM. We might be able to help you in some way.
Yeah. And thank you so much again for joining us, Jon. And we'll see you guys on another episode of Church Circle.